Loyal K9 desperately tries to save something. When the town sees it, they're horrified. Nestled between rolling hills and dense woodlands, the town of Willow Creek was a place where time seemed to stand still. The streets were lined with rustic houses, their wooden porches adorned with rocking chairs that creaked softly in the evening breeze. The townspeople lived simple, predictable lives. Morning coffee at the local diner, friendly nods exchanged on the sidewalks, and children playing in the open fields until the streetlights flickered on at dusk. Crime was rare in Willow Creek. The most exciting events were usually town fairs or the occasional lost pet. But despite its peaceful exterior, the town had its secrets. Whispers of strange occurrences in the nearby woods and abandoned houses that stood like forgotten relics of the past. However, no one paid much attention to rumors. After all, Willow Creek had always been a safe haven. But that was about to change. Among the town's quiet residents was Axel, a highly trained K9 German Shepherd who served alongside Officer Ethan Carter, the town's most dedicated law enforcer. Axel was no ordinary dog. He was intelligent, disciplined, and fiercely loyal. His sharp instincts and unmatched tracking abilities had helped solve numerous cases, from missing persons to uncovering hidden evidence in crime scenes. Ethan and Axel shared a bond that went beyond that of a handler and his K9 partner. To Ethan, Axel was more than just a police dog, he was family. The two had been inseparable since Ethan had rescued Axel as a pup and trained him into the exceptional K9 he had become. Together, they patrolled the town, keeping its people safe, though there was rarely anything serious to investigate. Axel had a quiet but commanding presence. His alert amber eyes never missed a thing, and his powerful frame moved with precision. The townspeople admired him. Children would often run up to him, eager to pet him, and shopkeepers would leave out treats for him near their doorsteps. He was a hero in their eyes, a silent guardian of Willow Creek. But one fateful night, Axel would prove just how irreplaceable he was. The evening had started like any other. The town was settling into its usual nighttime rhythm, lights dimming in the houses, the faint sound of crickets filling the air, and the occasional barking of stray dogs echoing through the empty streets. Ethan had just finished his routine patrol and was getting ready to call it a night when Axel suddenly stiffened. His ears pricked forward, his body tensed, and his nose twitched as he sniffed the air. A low, uneasy growl rumbled in his throat. Ethan, who had learned to trust Axel's instincts without question, immediately knew something was wrong. "What is it, buddy?" Ethan asked, watching as Axel's intense gaze locked onto something in the distance. Without warning, Axel bolted, his powerful legs propelling him forward with unrelenting urgency. Ethan barely had time to react before chasing after him. The streets of Willow Creek were eerily silent as Axel sprinted through the dimly lit town, weaving past alleyways and abandoned buildings. His pace was relentless, his determination unshaken. Ethan struggled to keep up, his heart pounding in his chest. Axel wasn't just running, he was hunting. Something was out there, and whatever it was, it had stirred something deep inside the K9. By the time Ethan reached the outskirts of town, a few concerned locals had stepped out of their homes, drawn by the sight of the police officer sprinting after his dog. Murmurs of confusion and curiosity spread among them. Axel had reached an old, neglected property on the town's edge. The house had been abandoned for years, its broken windows staring like hollow eyes into the night. The overgrown yard was wild with tangled weeds and gnarled tree roots. The air was thick with an unshakable sense of unease. Axel stopped abruptly near the base of a large oak tree. His paws began digging furiously, sending dirt flying in all directions. His deep, frantic whines echoed in the night. The townspeople, now fully awake and gathered around, looked on in growing alarm. Ethan swallowed hard as he stepped closer. Something inside him told him that whatever Axel had found was not going to be good. And he was right. The night air was thick with tension as Officer Ethan Carter struggled to keep up with Axel's relentless sprint. The German Shepherd moved with urgency, his powerful legs propelling him forward with a speed that sent gravel scattering under his paws. His ears were pinned back, and his sharp amber eyes were fixed on something unseen in the distance. Ethan had seen Axel act on instinct before, but never with this level of desperation. His heart pounded in his chest as he reached for his radio, ready to call for backup if necessary. "Axel, heal," Ethan commanded, but his voice barely registered in the urgency of the moment. Axel didn't stop. He was following something or someone. The dog's sharp instincts had locked onto a scent, and he would not rest until he reached his target. The streets of Willow Creek, usually peaceful at this hour, blurred past them. The town's cozy homes with their glowing porch lights seemed like a world away as Axel darted through the narrow alleys, past the empty storefronts, and toward the outskirts of town. The road beneath them turned rough, leading to the town's long-abandoned outskirts, where an eerie silence hung in the air. Suddenly, Axel veered sharply to the right, leading Ethan toward the crumbling remains of a once grand estate. The towering oak trees surrounding it swayed ominously in the wind, their branches casting twisted shadows against the moonlit ground. The estate had been abandoned for years, its once beautiful gardens now overrun with wild thorns and tangled vines. Ethan's stomach churned. What was Axel after? The German shepherd finally skidded to a stop at the foot of an ancient oak tree. Without hesitation, he began digging furiously at the base of the tree, sending loose dirt flying in every direction. His deep, urgent whines echoed into the night, cutting through the stillness like a siren. Ethan's blood ran cold. Whatever was buried there, it was alive. Ethan rushed forward, kneeling beside Axel. He could see it now, a small patch of dirt, freshly disturbed, as if something or someone had been hidden beneath it not too long ago. "Easy, boy. I've got this," Ethan muttered, reaching for the compact shovel strapped to his utility belt. He dug quickly, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Then his fingers hit something soft. A chill ran down his spine. Cloth. With renewed urgency, Ethan dug faster, pulling away damp soil until the outline of a small, motionless figure emerged. The dim glow of his flashlight revealed the pale face of a child. Gasps echoed behind him. Unbeknownst to Ethan, a small crowd of townspeople had begun to gather, drawn by the sound of Axel's frantic barks and the officer's desperate digging. The boy, no older than 5, lay cradled in the earth, his tiny frame covered in dirt. His lips were a sickly shade of blue, and his chest barely moved. "Dear God," someone whispered. Ethan's hands trembled as he brushed dirt away from the child's face. He pressed 2 fingers to the boy's neck, searching, praying. A faint pulse. He was alive. "Call an ambulance. Now!" Ethan barked at the stunned onlookers. Axel, sensing the urgency, let out another piercing bark, his body trembling with adrenaline. He nudged the boy gently, his wet nose prodding at the child's limp hand as if urging him to wake up. Ethan swiftly scooped the frail child into his arms, cradling him against his chest. He could feel the slight rise and fall of the boy's breath, shallow but steady. How had he ended up here? Who had buried him? And why? One thing was certain. If Axel hadn't found him, the boy wouldn't have survived the night. A murmur of confusion and shock spread through the crowd. The people of Willow Creek, still in their nightclothes, huddled together near the flickering glow of streetlights. Some clutched their robes tightly around themselves, while others whispered to one another, eyes wide with disbelief. "How did he get here?" an elderly woman asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who could do something like this?" another man muttered. Ethan didn't have answers yet. All he knew was that someone had buried this child alive and left him for dead. Someone had tried to erase him from existence, and that someone was still out there. Axel stood protectively beside Ethan, his chest heaving, his eyes darting between the townspeople and the darkened tree-line beyond. His instincts told him the danger wasn't over yet. As the wail of approaching sirens echoed through the night, the uneasy realization settled over everyone. Willow Creek was no longer the quiet, safe town they had always believed it to be. Something dark had crept into their world, and Axel had just uncovered its first victim. The eerie silence that had fallen over the gathered crowd was punctuated only by the distant wail of sirens. Ethan held the frail boy tightly in his arms, his heart hammering against his ribs as he tried to process the situation. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. Who had done this? And why? Axel stood rigid, his ears pricked forward, his body vibrating with tension. But something in his stance shifted. He sniffed the ground, his tail lowering slightly. Then, with a sharp whimper, he took a few steps back, his gaze locked on the disturbed patch of dirt. Ethan frowned, still on his knees beside the shallow grave. Axel wasn't acting like the rescue was over. Then the ground shifted. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as the soft earth trembled beneath them. Loose soil crumbled away, revealing something larger, something deeper than the shallow hole where the child had been buried. Axel barked wildly, circling the area, his claws scraping against the dirt as he pawed at the edges of what now seemed to be a hidden pit. Ethan's gut twisted. This wasn't just a grave. It was something more. A loud crack shattered the tense silence. The earth beneath Ethan gave way, sending a chunk of the ground caving inward. He scrambled backward just in time, still clutching the unconscious child, as a gaping hole opened up before him. Dust and loose debris tumbled into the abyss, swallowed by the darkness below. The gathered townspeople staggered back, horrified, as more of the ground crumbled away, revealing something that made Ethan's blood run cold. Lying just beneath the surface, barely concealed by the dirt, were bones. For a few heart-stopping moments, no one spoke. The horror before them seemed too surreal, too unimaginable to process. Skeletons. More than one. An elderly man clutched his chest, his mouth agape. A woman beside him covered her lips with trembling hands, her eyes welling with tears. Others simply stood frozen in place, their faces ghostly pale. This wasn't just one buried child. This was something far worse. Ethan's fingers tightened around the boy in his arms as he forced himself to look down. The skeletal remains lay jumbled together, some partially wrapped in rotted cloth, others with shreds of fabric barely clinging to them. Some were disturbingly small. More children. The realization slammed into Ethan like a punch to the gut. His breath came short and fast, his hands growing clammy despite the cold night air. Axel whimpered again, his tail tucked low, his usual unwavering bravery faltering in the face of what they had uncovered. His black fur bristled along his back as he took a hesitant step toward the open pit, letting out a low, warning growl. Ethan swallowed hard. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of the nightmare unfolding before him. How long had these bodies been here? How many were there? And who had buried them? The sirens were getting closer now, flashing red and blue lights finally appearing in the distance. But Ethan knew, deep in his gut, that this discovery wasn't just a local crime. This was something far bigger. The people of Willow Creek had thought they knew their town. They had believed it to be safe, peaceful. But now, standing in the dim glow of streetlights, staring into a mass grave, they realized they had been living alongside a monster all along. And that monster, it was still out there. A deafening silence gripped the crowd for a moment, their collective shock rendering them speechless. But then, panic erupted like a wildfire. Gasps turned into frantic whispers, whispers into cries of disbelief, and then finally screams. Some locals stumbled back, unable to bear the horrific sight of the mass grave. Others clutched their loved ones, their hands trembling, their eyes brimming with terror. A woman dropped to her knees, sobbing into her hands. An elderly man shook his head, muttering prayers under his breath, his face ashen. Ethan's grip on the unconscious boy tightened. His heart pounded in his ears, drowning out the noise of the panicked crowd. He had seen horrifying crime scenes before, but this was something else entirely. Axel barked sharply, his deep, commanding voice cutting through the chaos. His fur bristled, his eyes darting from the pit to the restless crowd. The tension in the air was suffocating, thick with fear and disbelief. Ethan forced himself to stay calm. Think, Ethan, think. The weight of the child in his arms reminded him of what was most important: saving this boy's life. He had no idea how long the child had been buried alive, how much damage had been done. Every second counted. He turned to the stunned faces around him, raising his voice over the rising panic. "Somebody call an ambulance, now." Took a few seconds for his words to register, but then, people scrambled to pull out their phones. Shaky hands dialed emergency services. Voices rushed and frantic as they relayed the shocking discovery. Ethan pressed 2 fingers against the boy's throat. Weak pulse. His breathing was shallow, uneven. Dirt clung to his pale skin, and his tiny body trembled from shock and exhaustion. "Hold on, kid. Just hold on." Axel let out another sharp bark, his ears swiveling, his body still tense. His instincts told him something wasn't right. Something was still out there. Ethan didn't have time to dwell on it. He turned to a woman standing nearby, her face still frozen in terror. "What's his name?" he demanded. "Do you recognize him?" The woman blinked, struggling to find her voice. That's Tommy." A shiver ran down Ethan's spine. He had heard that name before. Tommy Carter. A 5-year-old boy who had gone missing 2 days ago, presumed kidnapped, and now he had been buried alive. The gravity of the situation hit Ethan hard. If Axel hadn't found him in time, he didn't want to finish that thought. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the air, growing louder by the second. Finally, red and blue lights flooded the scene as paramedics and police officers arrived. Ethan rushed forward, carefully handing Tommy over to the EMTs. "He's barely breathing," Ethan told them, urgency thick in his voice. "We just pulled him out. He needs oxygen now." The paramedics worked swiftly, securing an oxygen mask over the boy's face, checking his vitals, and preparing him for transport. Ethan watched with bated breath as they fought to stabilize him. "He's in critical condition," one EMT murmured. "We have to move him fast." They loaded Tommy onto the stretcher, moving toward the ambulance. Ethan wanted to go with them, but a firm hand on his shoulder stopped him. "Detective Carter." Ethan turned to face Sheriff Owens. The older man's face was grim, his jaw tight. He had seen many things in his career, but never this. "What the hell did we just uncover?" Owens whispered, staring at the pit with wide, horrified eyes. Ethan exhaled slowly, his throat dry. "Something worse than we ever imagined." Owens swallowed hard, then turned to his deputies. "I want this entire area locked down. No one in or out until we know what we're dealing with." Ethan glanced back at Axel, who still stood near the edge of the pit, his body tense. The German shepherd had sensed something long before any of them had. This wasn't over. No, it was just the beginning. As the ambulance sped away, taking little Tommy to the nearest hospital, a haunting silence fell over the town square. The once bustling crowd of curious onlookers had been replaced by police officers, forensic teams, and investigators. The area was now sealed off with bright yellow crime scene tape, the flashing red and blue lights painting the night in an eerie glow. Ethan took a deep breath, his mind still reeling from the horrifying discovery. He turned to the forensic team as they carefully examined the pit where Tommy had been buried. The cold air was thick with the stench of disturbed earth and something much worse: decay. "We need a full excavation," Ethan ordered, his voice firm. "Something tells me this isn't the first time this has happened." As the forensic team worked, Axel stood nearby, his ears perked, his sharp eyes fixed on the hole. The German shepherd had sensed something far before any of them had realized what they were dealing with. A few minutes later, one of the forensic specialists gasped. "Oh my God!" Ethan rushed forward, his heart hammering in his chest. As the team dug deeper, what they uncovered sent chills down his spine. Bones. Tiny human bones. Ethan's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about Tommy. This was a burial site, and judging by the number of skeletal remains being unearthed, it had been used for years. Sheriff Owens stood frozen beside him, his face pale. "How many bodies?" he asked hoarsely. The forensic lead wiped a gloved hand across her forehead, looking visibly shaken. "We don't know yet, but it's more than one. A lot more. A graveyard. A secret dumping ground for innocent lives lost." Ethan clenched his jaw, his fists tightening. Someone had been doing this for years, right under their noses. The horrifying news spread through the town like wildfire. What started as whispers in the town square soon became a storm of fear, anger, and confusion. Parents clutched their children tighter, wondering if their town was ever truly safe. Many gathered near the police barricade, desperate for answers. Who did this? How long has this been going on? Could my child have been one of them? Questions poured in, but Ethan and Sheriff Owens had no answers. Only a horrifying realization. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a single act of cruelty. This was a pattern. A serial predator had been lurking among them, preying on the town's most vulnerable children. As parents searched through old missing persons reports, many started recognizing names that had been long forgotten. Children who had disappeared over the years, cases that had gone cold. And now they had found the unthinkable truth. The monster who did this was still out there. As the town reeled from the chilling discovery, there was one undeniable fact. Axel had saved Tommy's life. Had it not been for the K9's unwavering instincts, the boy would have been buried alive, never to be found. And worse, this dark secret would have remained hidden. News stations picked up the story, and soon, Axel became a local hero. A ceremony was held at the police station, where the town's mayor publicly honored Axel for his bravery. The German shepherd stood tall beside Ethan, his handler, as the town erupted in applause. Little Tommy, now recovering at the hospital, had a special gift for his rescuer. A small police badge that he had made with the help of the nurses. "Thank you for saving me," Tommy whispered as he hugged Axel, his tiny fingers running through the dog's thick fur. Axel nuzzled the boy gently, his tail wagging. A silent but powerful acknowledgement of their unbreakable bond. But despite the recognition, Ethan knew this wasn't the end. The graves they had uncovered were just the beginning of something much darker. And now he and Axel were on a mission. They weren't just going to celebrate this victory. They were going to hunt down the monster responsible. With the shocking discovery of the burial site, an intense investigation was launched. Forensic teams worked around the clock, uncovering more evidence that linked the graves to decades of missing children cases. The town, once quiet and peaceful, had become the center of a horrifying truth. A serial predator had been operating in the shadows for years. Ethan and his team combed through old records, re-examining every cold case that involved missing children. Files that had been locked away for decades were dusted off, and names that had been forgotten were now spoken again, with a desperate need for justice. Then a breakthrough came. DNA evidence extracted from the burial site led investigators to a suspect, a man who had been living in the town for over 30 years. He was someone no one had ever suspected. A respected member of the community, someone who had attended town hall meetings, waved at neighbors, and even volunteered at local events. When officers arrived at his home with a warrant, they uncovered something even more chilling. Hidden in his basement were photographs, personal items, and newspaper clippings of every child that had gone missing. He had kept trophies, a dark reminder of his crimes. The arrest was made swiftly, and when the news broke, the town was left in collective horror. How could we have been so blind? He was right in front of us this whole time. I trusted him. We all did. The trial was swift but intense. Families of the victims sat in the courtroom, their hands clenched, their eyes filled with anger, grief, and determination. When the guilty verdict was read aloud, a heavy silence fell over the room. A silence that was quickly broken by the soft cries of relief. Justice had finally been served. But for many, the wounds ran too deep to heal. The town of Ridgewood would never be the same again. Shaken to its core, the once close-knit community now looked at each other differently, with suspicion, with caution. Parents no longer let their children play outside alone. Strangers were no longer greeted with warm smiles, but instead with watchful eyes. The park where children once played freely was now eerily empty. Schools reinforced security, and missing persons posters that had once been ignored now caught everyone's attention. But in the midst of all the fear, something else began to emerge. A sense of unity. The townspeople came together to honor the lives lost, holding candlelight vigils and raising funds to support the affected families. A memorial was built in the town square, engraved with the names of the children who had gone missing. It served as a reminder, a promise that their town would never turn a blind eye again. And at the center of it all was Axel, the dog who had uncovered the town's darkest secret. Axel's bravery had not only saved Tommy's life but had also brought long-awaited justice to the town. His actions had led to the capture of a predator who had eluded law enforcement for years. To recognize his heroism, the town organized a special ceremony in his honor. The police department awarded Axel with a Medal of Bravery, an honor usually reserved for officers who had demonstrated extraordinary courage. As Ethan knelt beside Axel, placing the medal around the German shepherd's neck, the entire town erupted in applause. Tears filled many eyes as they watched the loyal dog sit proudly, his tail wagging. Among the crowd, little Tommy stood with his parents, his tiny hands clutching a drawing he had made. A picture of Axel, standing tall like a true hero. The boy walked up to Axel and held out the picture. "This is for you, buddy," Tommy whispered. "You saved me." Axel sniffed the paper, then gently licked Tommy's hand. It was a simple gesture, but one that spoke volumes. A silent bond between the child and the dog that had saved his life. As the ceremony ended, Ethan looked down at his loyal partner, running a hand over his thick fur. "We did good, boy," he murmured. "Real good." And with that, the sun began to set over Ridgewood, casting a golden glow over the town. A town forever changed by one heroic dog's unwavering loyalty. The story of Axel, the brave K9, is a testament to the power of loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. But beyond just a heart-stopping tale, it serves as a reminder of the importance of awareness, justice, and the role animals play in our lives. Now, we turn to you, our audience. Small Blue Diamond, what do you think of Axel's heroic actions? Small Blue Diamond, have you ever witnessed an animal doing something incredible? Small Blue Diamond, how do you think communities can come together to ensure justice and safety for all? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let's discuss this unbelievable story together. If you were moved by Axel's bravery, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories that showcase the resilience of both humans and animals. Let's spread awareness and celebrate the heroes, both human and animal, who make the world a better place.